Okay. Apparently I'm live. You all need to let me know that though, because it's not always the case, but I will take your word for it. If everything looks and sounds good, please let me know in the chat. And I am very glad to be here. It's another Monday, which is always the best place to be on a Monday night, aka Marauder Monday. Now, there's a little bit to talk about, and we're going to go through some of this information relatively quickly because we have to cover it all, but we also have to consider some things that maybe people aren't quite thinking about. 5x5 coming through. Water Bottle, Usual Suspect, Paul Gorecki, Isaac Haney, Bob R, RL, Gricio Nemo. Good to see you all. Thank you so much for being here. ND Prepper, thank you so much. Scott Bateman, my kind of people. All right, so we are here and we are ready to talk about some of the things that are happening. Now, I think we are all aware that a lot has happened over this past week and that we have some things to discuss that are going to be important based on the fact that we need to be more prepared for some of the things that are going on right now. Hopefully, everybody is staying safe out there and being highly alert based on the fact that things are a little more vitriolic right now. And we got to talk about that because it's not just you or I, it's everyone in certain environments and certain institutions that are being targeted. And that's why the live stream is titled SHTF is getting worse, which we know it's getting worse in many ways. There's multifaceted reasons for why it's getting so bad. But the indiscriminate targeting is something that we should really consider. And this is something that I want to discuss, especially for, my left-leaning preppers out there, for the liberal preppers out there. Look, even though you are of that political ideology and that is your deal, you are going to be targeted the same as us. If you're living in a rural environment, but maybe you swing more liberal, you're still going to be targeted. It's not about who is there or who does what or what each individual's thought process is based on what's going on right now. It's about the environment, the area, and the predominant culture of that area that's being targeted. So it's not just based on each individual person's thought process. It's going to be everyone. So I want you to keep that in mind because you might feel like you're safe because of whatever ideology you swing with. But at the end of the day, it isn't going to work that way. Collateral damage is a big part of any major campaign. And that's exactly what you should expect to be if this thing goes any further than what we're seeing right now. And collateral damage is what you will be. So I want to go ahead and drink a little bit of coffee real quick. And that is hot, and I like it. Okay, so we have Michigan here from Cheyenne Gilbert. We also have Oregon here, PNW Prepper, Texas Surplus Pro. Good to see you as well. The baby is always good to see you. All right, so here's what we got to talk about. The first thing I want to show you, and this is kind of just to get the whole vibe of this conversation started, okay? I want everybody to be on the same page and kind of have the same feelings, and I'm just trying to get everybody ready to go and get interested into why you need to be a little bit more alert, because it's just part of what's happening in the world right now and something that we have to pay attention to. Now, this is a screenshot from a thread on Reddit. And now this is not, verifiable info. This is just a thought process that somebody might have that you should be aware of, okay? So we'll go ahead and look at this really quickly. And this is some of the predominant thought process that we're seeing in the more radical or extreme ideological forums out there right this second. So real quick, I'll go ahead and read this. I'm pretty sure there's nothing super vitriolic here that's going to get us shut down. But the radical Christians are found in the rural areas. Their towns are defenseless. They have almost no cops, and their firemen are volunteers. And guess what? You know what? They're right about that. Okay, they have to borrow cops and firemen from neighboring jurisdictions miles away in order to handle anything big, and they think they're safe out there. Forget burning cities. Cities are on our sides. It's time for rural areas to feel the heat. You show up 100 deep in every rural town in a 50-mile radius and 10 on Revolution, you'll crash their system and make them pay. And if you think I'm kidding, I'm dead serious. This was caused by backward rural conservatives operating out of Christianized worldview. Even if they're not Christian, they're heavily influenced by it, aka indiscriminate targeting. Like I said, it doesn't matter what background you are or what your ideology is, okay? They were the ones who voted for, Trump in 2016, and they're disillusioned, blah, blah, blue collar, white trash, whatever you want to call it, to quote a country song, types who flipped massively for the GOP. Punish them, punish their towns. They say that BLM burned the cities to the ground. I say let them see firsthand what it's like when a community is truly burned to the ground. they want a civil war. They should have been careful for what they asked for and voted for. I'm not the organizing type, but maybe someone who is can organize that. Start in a certain state in the Midwest, often called the South's middle finger to America. It's literally what the South would have looked like if it wasn't reconstructed. Now, first off and foremost, to caveat that entire block of text right there that I just read, those are not my beliefs, and I'm not calling for anything to happen. I have to say that in order for YouTube to understand that that is not the point of this. The point of this was me to read something that's been put out there in the public sphere to just show you what some people's feelings and how high the vitriol has become, especially when it comes to people like you and I who might live in rural areas or have certain beliefs or certain ideologies or certain religion that is becoming a target for people who are feeling more radical based on recent events. And I find that to be a slightly dangerous situation, okay? And this is why we're being made aware of it. This is why I'm telling you about it, because we are finding ourselves in a very well-timed, very properly executed division process where things are falling apart worldwide, and I don't think they could have asked for something more divisive to occur at this point in time. Right before the midterms in the summer, the way it always works out somehow magically. So that is exactly what we're facing, and this is why I want everyone to be aware of this. But here's some things that I also want you to consider. So a lot of you are going to say what I would consider to be the typical response, the rhetorical answer to some of this, which is going to be, well, they don't have what we have, and we're ready, and we're stocked up, and we're trained, and we got the skills, and we're going to handle business. No big deal. Totally get that. But I want you to be aware that not only should you be prepared for indiscriminate targeting, but you should also be prepared for non-conventional, let's just say, action. Okay. I don't want to call it the big W, but you know what I mean. Okay. So what we have to talk about is that there's more than one way to skin a cat. And that's exactly what they'll do. They're going to utilize whatever resources they have to try to make your life more difficult. It doesn't matter if it's physical, it's conventional, or if it's actually kinetic. Sometimes things that happen in the background can be even more catastrophic. All right. All right. And Jetson thinks the soy boys will collapse with 40 pounds of gear they haven't trained with. I'm here to tell you it's not always just about the gear or about that kinetic situation. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But there's some other things that we have to figure out. Okay. Now, let's go ahead. And I see 6 Hour Frank is here. 6 Hour Frank, I recently became an MCX owner. Yes, it's early generation. No, it wasn't affected by the recall. I'm really excited. Moving on from there, I want everyone to know that we have some problems we have to face. Okay. So first and foremost, this is some of the more straightforward stuff that's being put out in the media right now, but it's stuff we need to at least address and be prepared for. Okay. So Department of Homeland Security tells churches, pregnancy centers to brace for violent pro-abortion night of rage. Okay. And I don't know if I'm even supposed to say the old A word here, but we're just going to say what we're going to say because we're trying to get the message out and trying to get people aware of what we should be prepared for. And like I said, I personally don't want any of these things to happen. I don't want anyone to suffer any kind of detrimental action, and I don't want anybody to have to face any of these challenges that are being thrown around right now. But what I will say is that if you're not looking at them as a possibility, you're going to be less prepared for them if they occur. So that's why we're having this conversation. I'm going to keep saying it throughout the night probably, but I am not promoting any of this. I am just trying to make people aware of it, okay? Now, and we're not discussing everybody's personal beliefs or ideology either. This isn't about that because, like I told you in the beginning, it doesn't matter what you think or how you vote or anything like that. You're going to be targeted just based on where you live, or maybe you are a very liberal person, but you still go to church or whatever, right? Well, that is going to still make you a target no matter what you think ideologically, okay? So it is problematic for all of us. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. This is where we are, okay? Now, the DHS is warning that these pro-life Catholic churches and these pregnancy centers and all these other places are becoming targets for some of these activists, all right? So what I want to just say about that is they're putting it out there because they know it's a possibility. Is there any direct targeting of certain areas right now? That's something that is something I'm not completely aware of. But what I will say is that because this information is being put out there, you have a couple of things to consider. One, you have to consider the fact that people who haven't thought about doing this might think about doing it now because they're reading about it and saying, oh yeah, that's a good idea, right? And the second thing to consider is that because it's out there, there's a possibility of it. So if these are places that you attend or you go to on a regular basis, you should be prepared for something bad to happen. You should be approaching your usual routine with a little bit more alertness and a little bit more, I would say, of a hardened target approach. Okay. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're going to wish you had a better way to defend yourself, or if you're going to wish that you had done more about having situational awareness. Okay. And Flyover State, thanks so much for joining the memberships. It's really cool. And I think I saw some super stickers or chats earlier. If I missed you, I really apologize. I'm just trying to get on a roll here. I think that was Dion Garza that sent one earlier. So thank you so much for that. This is where we just need to maintain, not necessarily gray man as much as we need to maintain a hardened target mentality. You don't want to be a victim. You don't want to find yourself in a situation that you could have avoided. So situational awareness is huge. And then having the ability to defend yourself or knowing what you have access to in regards to that is going to be a big deal when it comes to some of these scenarios. So keep it all in mind. If you are attending churches of any kind, or if you are someone who's going to pregnancy centers to try to get assistance or whatever it might be, you need to be aware that these are problems you could be facing here in the future. I don't want anybody to find themselves in a detrimental situation, okay? So that being said, all right, we all know that things become a little bit more, I would say, incendiary closer and closer to election time. And here we are, so close to election time, and all of this is happening. So it's very predictable, but at the same time, we know that certain aspects of our population tend to be more extreme. And when they go, they actually go. And that's one critique that I think a lot of people make about the right very often, is that they get upset, but they don't necessarily act. Whereas the left tends to act, even if it's very negatively, and even if it's received in a very negative way, they seem to just still do things. And that is not necessarily what I would want anyone else to do. And that's not necessarily what I'm promoting or asking for or advising. But what I'm trying to say is that because this situation seems to incite the left more than the right, I think that the activity we could see is going to be even more extreme in the sense of what it could produce. So that's just what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to accuse anyone of any sort of political crap. What I'm trying to say is that this is just based on recent history and facts that we have lived through over the last few years. Okay, so now let's see here. I just want to say that Jetson, you have some interesting ideas when it comes to standard carry. So, but no, I don't think that's my standard carry. Anyway, moving on from there. Okay, we still have some things to discuss. And I'm trying to get through this information because we need to, okay? And what we saw happen in Arizona is being referred to in many ways as an insurrection, right? So look, I don't like throwing that word around because I think it gets used very casually at this point in time. And it's being used to throw shade politically across the aisle. And that's something that we should reserve for true insurrection scenarios that are actually going to be changing the face of the country. And that's not what these events are that we're talking about. But what happened in Arizona is that basically a protest got out of hand right outside of the Senate building, and lawmakers were trapped inside. And of course, police had to respond and riot gear and all that kind of stuff. And basically it interrupted our ability to process as a democratic government. Okay, democratically elected republic, however you want to say it. All I'm trying to say is that we have a lot of very, I guess I'll just call it difficult times ahead. This is the division that we have right now in the country. And when these decisions are coming out and things are happening, these events are occurring. And we're going to see more and more of this the longer that this whole dichotomy exists for. Okay, the longer our government that portrays itself as being democratic, but is really just in it to win it on their own, the longer they exist in the same aspect that they do currently, the more of this we're going to see, because the division benefits all of them and none of us. And that's what we're going to keep watching happening. Basically, the lawmakers are being held hostage inside the Senate building due to members of the public trying to breach our security. And that is caveated with the smell of tear gas, and children of one of the members are in the office sobbing with fear. And this is exactly what happens when people lose faith in their government. And it doesn't matter which side of the aisle that people come from, this is what will occur, and this is what's going on. So this kind of is a reminder that this isn't just affecting you and I, this is affecting lawmakers and everybody else as well, but it is going to affect us in other ways too. And we're still talking about that. Mark Fallis, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for supporting the channel as usual. I really appreciate it. Prepper Batman, good to see you. I do want to say thank you to Exile Reviews and Northern Girl Hobbies for being here and for modding. It's always very beneficial to have you all here, so I appreciate that. Let's see here. Doomsayer says hot riot summer inbound, and I've talked about that, and I just want you guys to understand that we have a very large crowd within the preparedness community that would prefer to assume nothing's going to happen, because most of the time they'll be betting on, let's just say, red if they do that. Okay, there's a better chance, or at least an even chance, of them probably getting it right than trying to dissect situations and assume that something could happen. So we see a lot of that. And what we'll find out is that, yes, we're going to see more protests. Yes, we're going to see some more extremist behavior. And with what we've already seen when it comes to assassination attempts and things of that nature, we can only expect this whole escalation to get worse. And yet there's still people here in the community right now that will say, well, look, nothing's going to happen. It's already halfway through summer, and I don't think you have anything to worry about. And the interesting part about that to me is like, well, this just happened. Like, this is all happening. This is continually happening. And yet you're still going to sideline it as if it's an impossibility, which I don't understand that approach, because we're trying to be prepared. We're not trying to use fear to drive people towards one end or the other. We're not trying to scare each other into listening to each other. What we're trying to do is be prepared as best we can be, and then analyze the threats and adapt to them and have better strategy when it comes to having to deal with them, instead of sitting here and talking about how nothing's going to happen. So why are you so worried about getting this or that or doing this or that? I have people even tell me, like, what are you getting training for? You're never going to use it. I don't get it. Like, I just don't understand. But that's just me, okay? Abel Noriaga, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Brian Keith Prepper, good to see you as well. Celtic Warrior, you are your sidearm is an American Express card. I like it. All right, so you can always just buy your way out of a situation, right? I'm sure that that works in most bribery scenarios as well. Now, we will go ahead and talk about how this is going to escalate and continue. So to all of my friends here in the chat, and I do actually mean friends, because I do want all of us to be a community. We have to get along. And I'll just mention really quickly that I know some people aren't a fan of Bear Independent, right? Who I recently took a training course from and got to meet up with here in North Dakota. And it was a great opportunity to network. Well, you know what? We don't have to like everybody 100%. We don't have to be friends with everybody, and we don't have to like everything everyone does. But what we can do is still grow our community and try our best to be as strong as possible to face the coming challenges ahead. And I think that's important. I actually networked and met other North Dakotans at that training who I exchanged phone numbers with, and I'm planning on meeting up with at some point in time so we can establish a better network. So that's what it's all about. We have to get out a network to grow numbers, grow strength. And you know what? That first slide I showed in the chat about how rural towns don't have cops and don't have firemen and they need volunteers and all that kind of stuff, that's totally true. I'm not going to argue that. They're actually right about that. My town has like 5 cops, okay? That's just how it works out here. But we take care of ourselves and we take care of each other. But growing that network and that community only makes us stronger. So when those 5 cops aren't enough to deal with what might come our way, the rest of us can step in and say, well, we got this, okay? So, but we have to have that community and that organization to be able to do that. And if we're always pigeonholing ourselves because we're not allowing ourselves to, get past somebody's personality or get past somebody's beliefs or whatever it might be, then we're only going to hurt our own cause. Whereas the people on the other side of the aisle that seem to be organizing very well right now and seem to have plans for what they're going to do to people like you and I who might live out in the country, well, they don't care about each other's this or that as much as they care about what you and I do. So that's always something you should keep in mind. I think that that's a big thing we like to kind of pass along at times. And Jetson, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Let's see. What's your ideal amount of ammunition to have on hand? Okay, Pork Chop, I'll answer this real quick and easy for you. I like at least minimum 1,000 rounds of each cartridge that I currently stock, but my goal is 10. And people say, that's crazy. You'll never take that with you. You don't need that. The whole goal for me is if the supply chain completely falls apart and I never have access to it again in my entire life, I can keep training regularly and still feel good about it and know that I have reserves for if things do fall apart to the point where I actually need it for what it was made for. That's my thought process. Moving on from there, here's why we need to keep understanding the escalation is going to continue, and the fact is that it is organized as well. Okay, so you guys remember a long time ago, I made a video called SHTF is, on an agenda, or there's an agenda of unrest, I think is what I called it. And that the unrest was already marked on the calendar, right? I think this was from like 2 years ago. But basically, Shutdown DC is still an organization. These people don't go away after an election goes by. This is something we have to keep in mind. People like to get riled up and organized for an election, and then they get out and they vote and they do all this and that and activism and everything else. And then they turn around and they say, okay, we're done now, and we'll come back in 2 or 4 years, depending on the situation, right? Well, these organizations maintain their validity, and I'll call it validity in the sense of having an organized network and having a website and everything else that gives them that establishment. But at the end of the day, they have this whole movement now about shut down SCOTUS, okay? And what they do and how organized they are, because a lot of these are the types of people that we talked about saying that, rural Americans need to feel the burn, basically. They have jail support forms, how to fill out a form so that if you get arrested, you're ready to go and ready to get out of it, right? And who's going to be doing the jail support? What should I pack with me? You need a bunch of water, trust me on that. And medications in case you're arrested, right? In pharmacy containers with your name. And don't forget sunscreen. So imagine that we're talking about building like a bug out bag or something like that. Okay, great, preparedness. But these people are like, you need water, you need medicine in case you're arrested, and then you need some sunscreen. See how straightforward and to the point they are about what exactly they're planning. Being arrested is like the number one thing they're planning for here. And in fact, they're planning on it so hard that they're telling you to bring medications with you, okay? What should I leave at home? And here's what I tell you. Don't bring any of these weapons. Don't bring anything illegal, any of this illegal stuff, because we don't want to get arrested or painted in a bad light based on breaking the law, right? That's their concept anyway. What should I wear? What if I need accommodations? Should I talk to reporters? They have all of this information laid out in layman's terms, easy to understand nomenclature that nobody has to second guess, and they're organized and they're ready to move forward on any of their shutdown SCOTUS plans that they have right now. And this is where things are. So this originally started with shutting down DC during the elections and stuff like that. Now it's moving on to shut down SCOTUS, right? And now they're trying to get everybody together and do all that. Look, I'm not trying to preach any type of political affiliation or ideology right this second. What I'm trying to show you is that the people who are organizing to do the things that we talked about earlier in the stream are very well organized and are doing things, okay? They're moving forward and they're making calls to action on a regular basis. So don't think that these people aren't going to just, stop doing what they're doing one day because they get bored or they need to go to their jobs or whatever else it is, because that's not the case. They have a lot more going on in the sense of what they're trying to put together, okay? I need some more coffee. Now, Arkansas Whoop-Ass is here. Good to see you. Noel, dude, you are here as well. And, yes, we're going to talk about some more of the things that you just mentioned, too. Don't worry, we're on our way, okay? Now, let's see. We've got Free Power. Good to see you. You're in the Black Hills. That's cool. I like the Black Hills. I think that's what you're referring to, unless you love that ammunition brand, I guess. So what else do we have to worry about? So here's the thing. I want you guys to consider how this could work when it's not just specifically related to kinetic conventional attacks or targeting, right? Not everything is kinetic or conventional. Some things can be done without having to have somebody right in front of you or at your location. And that is where the rural environment preppers like myself and like a lot of you here tend to maybe be a little lackadaisical. We tend to think, oh, this isn't going to be a big deal because I live really far away and nobody's going to get to me, right? And real quick, Robert Von Darth says, in self-defense, you have a cascade of mistakes, right? So don't have an ego and avoid and avoid. I agree with that. And of course, you said a lot more than that, but I'm trying to not say anything too crazy here on the stream. What I'm trying to say is that I agree with you. Avoidance is still key, and that's what we try to do as survivalists, right? To survive situations. But you can't always avoid things, especially if they come to you. What I'm going to say now is that it's not always going to be a self-defense situation. It's going to be more of an awareness scenario because there's a lot of things that can happen. So I want to remind everybody about these other threats that exist that don't require a bunch of protesters to show up in your town, okay? So back in 2021, or actually in 2020, but for 2021, they were warning us about domestic cyber attacks on the rise, okay? And it's about how more domestic cyber attacks were happening throughout the country that weren't necessarily being blamed on Russia and weren't necessarily being blamed on overseas entities. These are domestic cyber attacks. Now, there's a lot of things related to this concept that, of course, we can go through and pick apart. It's really in-depth and very boring in many ways. But what I'm trying to remind you here, okay, is that cyber attacks don't always have to come from Russia. A lot of them probably come from the US and are blamed on Russia. Let's be honest, okay? But who do you think has the sway when it comes to our technology, when it comes to our cyber arena here in the United States? What side of the aisle and what ideology do you think has the most manpower dedicated towards IT and cybersecurity, right? I have a feeling that there's a disproportionate amount of people who could be very upset based on their ideology and based on their thought process right now, who also have the ability to access things via the internet that you wouldn't want them to be able to access. Not holding from any other situation regarding DNS server shutdowns and everything else related to cyber attacks. There's a lot of things that can happen. And if any organizations get targeted, or if you personally get targeted by some of these entities that have a lot of power when it comes to their ability to wield cyber power, then they'll take you out very quickly. And if you think the electric grid is very vulnerable to a cyber attack or an EMP or something like that, imagine your power relay stations and stuff like that in the small towns, right? Those are extremely vulnerable and have much more outdated systems in many ways. The other thing to keep in mind is that we rely on very small amounts of, I guess you would say, retail outlets and other businesses within small towns in order to operate. When it comes to your local bank, when it comes to your 1 or 2 gas stations, when it comes to your singular grocery store, if any of those get taken out in the sense of, let's just say basically power or even refrigeration, or who knows what else can be done, suddenly you don't have access to food and everything else. And all this can be done easily through cyber attacks. And domestic cyber attacks are a real thing. This isn't just something that happens from Russia. So you have to keep that in mind, especially based on the fact that the people who run the largest technology companies on the planet tend to swing one way ideologically in most situations. And that is something you should be concerned about, because they know that people in the rural environments have the equipment and the training and the gumption to do things in a kinetic way. So why not just do it from afar, where they can't actually use any of their equipment or their training or their gumption? This is what you should definitely be considering right now, okay? And I think we can definitely see that happening to religious institutions, and especially things related to like pregnancy centers and stuff like that. But if they want to target small towns and rural environments, it wouldn't be hard to do so, especially if they pick singular towns out and started doing them individually, okay? Now, the other thing to keep in mind, based on this whole cyber threat and everything else related to it, is that whole cyber polygon thing that we were all talking about for a little bit there, right? It's postponed. Now, a lot of this is because Sberbank, who was the one who was funding it, is one of the largest financial institutions in Russia. And now, of course, this has to be postponed. It was scheduled for July 8th. It's not going to happen now. Amazingly, a lot of companies suddenly realize that working directly with Russia for their cybersecurity is maybe not a good idea, right? And that, during conflict, that maybe giving Russia the keys to the castle isn't the best idea. But they did it for years before that. And so this is an interesting development, just in the sense of this large cybersecurity training exercise is now postponed due to what's happening overseas, but just also reminds you that that threat always looms, and that these entities are all intertwined in one form or another. This was put on by Sberbank, but also hosted by IBM, which means that basically any network that uses any type of business software is probably linked in with IBM. We also know that IBM is also the main provider of computer systems for the military. So there's a lot of interesting intertwining going on there, and that is postponed, which I thought was interesting for you to consider when it comes to cyber attacks, and the fact that these people could easily target us without having to allow you to, pull out that equipment that you think is going to save you from these situations. Because I have it, I train with it, and I like it. But that doesn't mean I think it's going to actually stop things like cyber attacks from happening. You better believe it. The other thing I want everyone to keep in mind is that tomorrow night, I'll have a video come out, which will be an update on my SHTF loadout, which everybody likes SHTF loadouts. Everybody wants to know what belt are you running, what plate carrier you're running, what kind of rifle you got, all that good stuff. I have a good time with that kind of stuff and I enjoy it. But what I will say is there's some B-roll in it where I'm doing some training where I'm doing things wrong. And I'm excited to see everybody say stuff in the comments like, you look like an idiot. You're never going to be able to do anything. And I wish you weren't around if things were going down because I know you'll shoot me in the back. But here's the thing. I'm just some dude that's taken training and I'm at least willing to put it out there and let everybody see what I'm doing to show that I'm trying to improve and become better rather than showing you the best split times I could possibly have, rather than showing you the one time I actually hit the target at 400 yards, rather than showing you all those things that make you look like a cool guy. I'm just some dude that wants to show everybody else that we need to train because I suck at it. So hopefully that's the idea that comes out of it, is that me doing some of that shooting is me going, oh, okay, well, I guess I should probably work a little bit harder. But you know what? A lot of people will just say that I'm trash and I shouldn't even be on the internet. And that's okay too. But hopefully you get some good ideas from some of that gear that I put out there. Now, Jay Randall says, mags in your community is the best plan for rural areas. Stay connected with the folks you trust. And I agree with that. And I'm doing my best to try to network. And I have a couple new guys that I found in town that I actually met at my last firearms training class who live in the same town as me. So here we are, and I'm excited about it. So, and like I say in the video tomorrow night, I'm not previous or prior military or law enforcement or anything like that. And I'll never claim to be. You better believe it. So it is just what it is. I'm trying my best to learn and do more. And Stephen Petrokowski, sorry about that. Yeah, in the video, I'll be running a 308, 6 hour 716i. And I will tell you that for close quarters stuff and trying to do like room clearing and door clearing and stuff like that, it was a lot harder to do with that giant rifle. So I'm just going to throw that out there. Now, let's talk about what other tools are in their toolbox that they can use against you without having to actually see you in person. I am 100% on board with gearing up and being able to protect yourself. But these things can be done without you ever seeing anybody in person. So what are you supposed to do in the sense of defending yourself from some of this stuff? Well, we all know that the recent gun control bill that was signed into law has some tools in the toolbox for what people may or may not want to do to you. So now this gun control bill has a lot of interesting stuff in it, right? But the main focus is going to be the red flag laws. That's going to be the big deal that you really need to pay attention to. Now, there's some other stuff in there, like the whole extended background checks for people from 18 to 21 so they can get around the boyfriend loophole and stuff like that. All that crap. I get, yeah, it's just, anyway, sorry, I don't want to go on a rant. But what I'm trying to say is that the red flag laws are where it can get very difficult, because what that's going to allow is people who have something against you to then use that power to disarm you and to cause you strife. And it doesn't have to necessarily be true. And so this can all happen. And this is basically like mass swatting in many ways. Okay. So basically what can happen is someone can say, well, I was with that guy 10 years ago and he was abusive, and I'm just worried about his mental state based on the fact that he has firearms and he is also, you know, willing to perpetrate violence, right? And that person suddenly has a very bad day. It doesn't mean that everything goes through. It doesn't mean that they get everything taken away. It doesn't mean that they find themselves in jail or anything like that. But no matter what, if you have to interact with the police in a negative way based on the fact that you have firearms and based on the fact that you may or may not be a danger, it's going to cause a lot of problems for you. And this is going to be another tool in the toolbox for people who want to deal with folks like you and I who prefer things like the Second Amendment and want our ability to defend ourselves. It's going to create loopholes and scenarios that will allow someone who wants to cause you harm, whether or not it's physical doesn't matter, but mental harm, and in the sense of just wasting your time and putting you on a list, or at least making people aware of you, is going to cause problems. And we all like to maintain our OPSEC, right? Well, your OPSEC will get blown if somebody makes a bogus red flag call on you, just because now you have that interaction you would have never had to have otherwise. And there's a lot of things happening here, which I'm not a fan of, but I wanted to mention this because these new laws can easily let people in to your life that you didn't want into your life before. And they also allow people to cause you a significant amount of problems if things don't go the way you would usually plan for them to go based on circumstance. You don't know what police are going to show up. You don't know what your situation is going to be when they show up. You don't know a lot of things, a lot of factors that could escalate the situation further than you wanted it to, just based on the fact that timing was bad. So these are all considerations to make. These red flag laws are another tool in the toolbox where things can be done to you without you having to actually have any kind of physical or personal interaction. So I wanted everyone to be aware of that, because I know regularly in our conversations here that we talk about, look, I'm ready. I've got the equipment. I've got the training. I'm ready. I got skills, and I'm not worried about it because I'll take care of me and my own and we'll defend our property. I understand that. But if they don't have to come to your property and they can still ruin your life, that is something you have to consider occurring. Okay. So now, let's see. T-Rex is worried about the werewolf preppers. And I totally get that. So, and that's something we all have to consider. But I would say, based on the scenario that we met at, based on the exclusivity of the type of training we recently did, it's not just I who vetted these people. They were pre-vetted by some others who are trusted within a group as well. So there is a little bit more of a layer to it. And also, let's just say it like it is. Werewolf preppers, just like some of these people that are threatening rural Americans, well, those werewolf preppers have to physically come to you to get your stuff. So I'm just going to throw that out there in the sense of, I may or may not have something for them if they decide to do that. Now, Celtic Warrior, I love my AR-10, but I definitely need to get out and train more. I feel like time's running out. Here's what I'll tell you right now. I don't know if I can even afford to train enough on an AR-10 in order to be as proficient with it as I want to be. The ammo is expensive. The recoil is heavy. The rifle itself is heavy. It changes the dynamic of what you're capable of. And, doing some training with it and some running and stuff like that with it recently kind of opened my eyes to some other ideas based on the fact that I'm just not a good enough shooter to wield that rifle in the way that I want to. That might be an honest situation I have to, have that talk with God about, between me and him. I got to be like, man, I'm sorry, but like, I'm trying my best here, but I don't know. I might have to take it back a notch and work better on myself before I can step up to that level. Okay. Anyway, and it all just depends on your setup. Don't get me wrong. So let's move on to this next part of the conversation. All right. So we know that there's a lot of things coming our way. Let's go ahead and discuss a little bit of what's happening overseas just to keep our finger on the pulse. Okay. House of Lamar says, what's a werewolf prepper? A werewolf prepper is somebody who only prepares for the idea of taking from preppers, and they will come take your stuff because that's their number one preparedness route. They train and they have skills and they go out and do a lot of like shooting and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, their thought process is they'll come get your stuff from you because they'll have the power to be able to do so. So that's exactly what they try to do. Fight for our right. They do sell silver bullets. You'll have to find those on your own, but they do exist, I guarantee you. And there's a company who used to make 357 Magnum 1911s that may or may not be able to make silver bullets. So just throwing it out there. Anyway, let's see here. What else is happening? Well, we all know NATO is increasing its readiness force to well over 300,000 troops. Okay, so NATO is getting ready for things to escalate over there. We all knew this was coming, but we didn't know when or how fast. Okay, and that's one of the hardest parts about trying to analyze things that are happening overseas and analyze our involvement with some of these different scenarios that are occurring. Because as preppers, we have to keep an eye on it. We have to see what's going on because it affects a lot of things. It affects obviously the food supply. It affects our ability to get certain equipment. It affects our thought process when it comes to different types of equipment. As we're watching what's going on over there, we're watching what those troops are doing. We're also seeing the equipment that they're using. We're seeing what is working, what's not working. There's a lot of good learning opportunity happening. But at the same time, if something's working, good luck getting it, right? So these are the things that we have to remember. And then at the other thing to consider is that the more this escalates and the longer this goes on for, the more likely U.S. involvement will exist, which will then push us all into a different scenario, because now if we're in a time of war, everything becomes more difficult. It doesn't matter what it is. Everything gets a little bit tighter, right? So make sure you're trying to establish yourself as best you can right now. With the Federal Reserve raising interest rates and everything else going on, the time for getting a mortgage or buying a home or whatever might have gone by a little bit, okay? So it just depends on your situation, but I still think having a permanent residence and somewhere you can call your own, even if you have to finance it, because most of us do, well, still better than not having something, right? So these are considerations to make, but don't set yourself back financially just because you're panicked and you're worried about not being able to get in the door before it gets even worse. But it is nice to have an established home operating base, of course, right? So what they're saying is Stoltenberg says, okay, We will enhance our battle groups in the eastern part of the alliance up to brigade levels. We will transform the NATO response force and increase the number of our high readiness forces to well over 300,000. So just keep in mind that this is all in response to the Russian aggression, which means that they're anticipating the possibility of needing this to deter it. And if that deterrence actually occurs, now we're in a very hot conflict throughout all of Europe. And that is not something any of us want to experience or see happening. Doesn't matter if it's far away, it's going to affect us directly. And the US will have to get involved if other NATO countries do. And that means things get real weird real fast. And don't you dang forget how close Alaska is to Russia. And don't you forget about how the Arctic Circle is being taken over by Russia and China right now, and how easily they can enter from Canada, because apparently sometimes they actually invite them to do military training exercises there anyway. Just going to throw that out there. But the other things to consider is that my good friend Rudy over the Alaska Prepper, I'm worried about him if this thing goes bad because, he's close. So keep that in mind. We got to remember our people, all right? So now, what does that mean? Well, also keep this in mind. I just wanted to throw you off, apparently. Keep this in mind. We are going to have some issues trying to find more people. What do I mean by that? I mean more people to join the army, okay? Why is the army desperate? Well, they're not meeting their quotas. Why are they really desperate? That's something that you can speculate on. But at the end of the day, I think that we are having some issues when it comes to getting our military up to fighting force, which, okay, here's what you have to keep in mind. This isn't about recruits and all that kind of stuff, okay? Get out of your ads. All right. The Army's adding quick sign-up bonus or quick ship bonuses of up to $35,000, right? And then they're also saying that we don't care if you have a high school diploma anymore. They're cutting the GED or high school diploma requirement. They're trying to get people into the Army and send them off and give them 35 grand to make this whole thing work better for everyone, right? This is, to me, showing that not only are we shorthanded, but if a hot conflict erupts, it's not going to wait for Army recruiting to actually get up to its quota. What that means is that if we get into a hot conflict, there's a great chance that the draft comes back into play, because as of right now, we don't have enough military personnel and we're not getting enough to replenish the ranks. So therefore, the only way to pivot and actually have what we need come hot conflict scenario is through a draft. And we all know that they're trying to add, or they did add women to the draft, I believe. For some reason, I can't think for sure if that happened or not. So if you guys know, let me know in the chat right now, yes or no, did they actually make it so women are a part of the draft now? I know it's been talking about for a long time, but I don't remember for sure if they made it that way. And then basically, yeah, they're going to start drafting again. If that's what's going to happen. And let's see. Stevie's, I know I can get rid of the ads. I know that. But sometimes I like when you guys see me looking at like high heels and like weird underwear and stuff, because it kind of keeps everybody on their toes and makes them really think about like all the weird stuff I might be up to on my free time. So I enjoy having that little bit of mystery. You know what I mean? Now, let's see. Prepper Medic says, no, they cannot be drafted. Okay, so right. So they've been talking about that for a very long time. They haven't done it yet, but you better believe they would probably do it if they had to. And guess what? I think that there's a good chance that if this whole conflict goes hot, they're going to have to do the draft once again, because this is telling in the sense of why they're so desperate, and it's telling in the sense of the fact that we don't have enough people. So I just wanted to mention that and let everybody know that that is something else we should be paying attention to. Now, let's see here. Rachel Liu says, no, women have not been added to the draft yet. Thank God my kids won't qualify due to health issues. They're not snowflakes, but they could not make it. Hey, sometimes you just got to be honest about situations and somebody's capability. So it is what it is. But you know what? I don't think any parent really wants to ever see their child get drafted. But unfortunately, I have a feeling that if things get worse overseas and we get involved, I think some parents are going to have to experience that, and we'll see what happens in the sense of people's reaction, let's just say. The hardest part about a draft and the hardest part about a support scenario for the military during times like these is that our country is so divided, and that people are so divided over our current leadership that it's hard for people to want to support whatever decisions are being made on that level. Okay. That is an issue. that we have to keep in mind, because that is not going to work for us. Okay. And I don't like that. I just don't like it. I just don't like it. Okay. So we are in a situation where we have to keep people grounded, and we have to remind ourselves that there's a bigger picture, and that we have to maintain our country and our freedom in some form or another. And sometimes we're gonna have to put aside the differences and make it happen in the sense of doing what's best for us. And that's just really hard to really consider and wrap our head around right this second, based on everything going on. I mean, people would definitely be having a hard time supporting what's happening. It doesn't matter what decisions are being made, because a lot of bad decisions are constantly being made. Okay. Pork chop. China's requiring masculinity classes for boys and less video games, while the USA is going woke. China's preparing for war. I agree with you. I think they definitely are. And that's exactly what these other countries are doing. If anyone thinks that Russia isn't using the current conflict as a training ground, you're being a little bit naive about it, because honestly, it's the best type of training, because it's force on force that is actually peer on peer. We're talking about equal levels of military might. We're not talking about, a situation like being in a third world country and occupying it with supreme and superior technology and weaponry. We're talking about two different fighting forces that both have similar weaponry and similar technology. So that's giving them a lot of data to work with when they go back to the drawing board in order to maybe write up some plans about an even bigger foe. So these are all situations that we should be considering. And a lot of you saying it in the chat right now is that people don't believe in the leadership we have. And I know, and that's the biggest problem we have right now, is that people aren't going to trust the decisions that are being made, which means we're going to have a lot of difficult times ahead if we see a hot conflict break out. It's not going to be as cut and dry as something like World War II. Now, World War II, of course, there was still political division in the country and stuff at that time. But what I will say is that once Japan attacked, and of course the let's just say the information surrounding the attack when it came to the intel being received prior to it, either way, once the attack occurred, suddenly the support for joining the war effort was there. And a lot of people went in and signed up rather than having to be drafted, because that's just what had to happen. And people were there to defend freedom and defend people and stop the threat. But I don't know if I could see the same thing happening here in the United States again. Even if we actually got attacked or something, I don't know how this country could literally come together and say, yeah, no, we all have to just set aside our differences and do what we got to do right now. No, I don't think so. I don't think that's going to work. So this is an issue we're having, and it's something we have to be prepared for. But I also just want to remind you that people in our own country are already a threat, and they are threatening us in the rural environment. And look, a lot of people are coming in saying, hit that like button. If you don't mind, go for it. I mean, look, here's one thing I don't do a lot in this channel, which may be problematic for me, but I don't ask people to hit like, and I don't ask people to do a lot of like replies and comments and stuff. But that stuff really does matter for trying to get the reach and trying to get the message out. So if that's what you want to do, that's how it's going to help. And I have had people ask me what they can do to help, and that's the best stuff you guys can do, in all honesty. So I appreciate that. But we have to do what we can to defend ourselves, harden ourselves in the sense of being a target, and understand that it's not necessarily going to come kinetically, and that we might receive an attack via cyber. We might receive an attack via red flag laws. There's a lot of different things that can happen to us, even though we're shielded out here in a rural environment and we have the equipment and the training and the skills. There's a lot of stuff that can occur that we don't have any way of defending ourselves from. So I want everybody to keep that in mind, okay? If CBDC is implemented, UBI comes next. Viv B said that, and I agree with you. And in fact, I think that the table has been set in many ways when it comes to UBI, because I feel that Americans are going to be so desperate here relatively soon based on inflation and the rising cost of food and the cost of living in general, that they're going to be begging for it. And that even people with conservative values who are generally going to not want additional government programs and additional spending and everything else related to it, I think they're going to ask for it too, because first off, they're going to need it because people are desperate and they're losing money fast, and no one's going to be able to get through this very easily or unscathed. And second off, they got used to it during the advanced tax credit thing during the last year when they were getting advanced child tax credits out. And I think people adjusted their budget to some of that and then realized suddenly that they weren't getting another $4, $5, $800, $1,000, $2,000 a month that they were used to. So there's a lot of things to keep in mind. Carl S says no to government programs. I mean, yeah, I want less government. I think we all do too. UBI, Rachel Lou, is universal basic income. But you know what? I will say that we're going to get it probably because people are going to be begging for it. Okay. Isaac Henry, my first super chat. You're my favorite prepping channel. Stay strong, everyone. Hey, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And look, I'm just a guy trying to get out a little bit of a message, help people get prepared, and share my journey with you all. I hope you understand that. I'm never coming to this channel or making videos as if I'm some kind of expert on the subject. I'm just sharing my process, which was developed from either researching other people's processes or developing some of my own based on experience, and then seeing if it helps somebody else accomplish their goals. I'm not ever going to come to you and say, look, this is the only way to do it because that's how I do it, and otherwise you're wrong. Because you know what? I always have a lot to learn, and I want to learn more. So I might get a little riled up sometimes in the comments when people say really dumb stuff or when people are very insulting just because they don't like me or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, I do get a lot of actual critiques that are actually very functional in the sense of being able to improve. And even just basic stuff, people are like, hey, your audio sucks. Cool. All right. So I just got a new microphone set up thanks to a good friend of mine. And now that microphone does a lot better of a job. So these are things I try to improve on. No, it's not just video related. It's very much prepper related. But I just wanted to throw that out there as an example. Okay. And now I will say Smoky Blazer. No, I am not cross training. I am just lifting weights and doing cardio. I've cut my diet down to basically like low carb vegetables and protein. I eat a lot of meat and a lot of vegetables. And then I run for about 2 and 3/4 of a mile every other day. And then I also do some speed walking as well. And then I do a bunch of push-ups and a bunch of weights. And honestly, it's very basic stuff, but it's definitely worked. And I'm down to the lightest I've been in like my entire adult life. And I also am in the best shape as well. So yeah, I might look a little skinny, which I know some people were concerned about, but at the end of the day, I'm in way better fitness and I am, or way better shape, I guess is a better way to say that. But I can run further than I ever could run before. And I could definitely handle myself better than I ever could before. Spring Hill Outdoors, I currently weigh 191 pounds. So, and by the way, I'm 6'3". So just so everybody knows, that's actually pretty slim and trim, I guess you would say. But, I don't want to, turn into a twig, but I definitely want to be able to survive in a SHTF scenario. And fitness is huge. Look, people need to understand, like, I am in the best shape I've ever been in. And it's all because I want to practice what I preach, but it's also because I want to physically be able to survive an SHTF scenario. And although I'm out learning how to like shoot guns and do all this cool guy stuff, which is really fun, and I'm very passionate about it, I can't do that stuff if I'm not ready to rock. And so I thought it was very important for me to actually get out there and make it happen. And so that's where I'm at. Minuteman 69, you're a little thinner than I am, but at the same time, I'm very much shaped like a barrel. So you'll have to understand that I can only get so thin. All right. I'm never going to be 160 pounds. But look, for anyone who's out of shape and can't do it, do what you can. Okay. And little Cy, if I'm 70, should I put a bullet in my head? No, of course not. But you have to be realistic about your capabilities, and you have to try your best to try to figure out what you're going to be the most efficient at when it comes to providing something to your community or to your family or to your immediate mag. And that's important. And what I've always said in the whole, physical fitness realm is that if you can't do it based on disabilities or health or whatever it is, then use your brain and make that your greatest asset so that you can actually put that into your mag and your immediate family's strategy cabinet. And that way they have you to rely on when it comes to what do we do now? You're there to tell them about the strategy and the intel, and then they can execute whatever kinetic action needs to happen. These are just the things I think about and consider, but this is just my thought process, okay? Now, here's what I want to say. All of you are the best. Monday nights, this is the best place to be. We have to do what we can. Prepping by faith. We've all got something to offer. 100%. That's exactly what I mean by all this. We have to do what we can, and we have to be realistic about our capabilities, okay? And I think that we are all doing our best to figure that out every single day, right? But at the end of the day, I want all of you to do what you can to watch your six. Keep that situational awareness up, please. Because right now, going to church, could be dangerous, okay? If you're going to pregnancy centers trying to get support, it could be dangerous, all right? If you're going into very left-leaning environments wearing a Gadsden flag shirt, that could be dangerous. Now, I'm not telling anybody not to be proud of who they are and do their thing, right? Do your thing. But be aware that by doing your thing, you might be making yourself more of a target. So be prepared to react to that if that's what happens. That's what we have to be realistic about. It's not always about changing who you are. Sometimes it's just understanding that because of who you are, things might be more dangerous in a certain area where you may or may not be. This is just the real life we're living right now. Thank you guys so much for being here. I appreciate all of you. Rip Curl Readiness, great to see you. Thank you for being here. Vincent, let's see, Coffee First and Speak. Good to see you too. East Tennessee Preparedness is here. We got Yardbirds is here. Free Power, RL. Everybody, you are amazing. If you need anything from me, you guys know what to do. Please jump into the Discord and say hello, and let's discuss crazy stuff because it's a good time, but let's also talk about other cool stuff like rifles, and let's talk about bug out bags, and let's talk about first aid and anything else you can think about. But besides that, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.